Hi everybody, how are you doing today? This is Joseph Nunn. I'm one of the TAs for SOCSI 3A. I've been very sick the last couple days, but I'm going to start making these Excel videos to get them out to you guys. So let's get started. Alrighty. So I made the initial videos for installing Microsoft Office applications on Windows and running a VPN to get to campus if you need that. One of the things is once you've got this application installed on Windows, is you go down here and you can find it inside of your all apps. Just look for Excel. And when you open it, you're going to get this screen here. Now, I'm not an expert in Excel, but I'm an expert at computers, and I program a lot in Python and other programming languages, and occasionally throughout my career I've run into cases where you're going to have to use a little bit of Excel. So it's just something you're going to have to familiarize yourself with over time. Very commonly in the sciences, when you run into something where you're going to end up using Excel, it's because you're going to get the data, whatever data you have, in a format called CSV, which is right here at the top. That's comma separated values. And what that looks like is you're going to get every row in your text file is going to just be an element from your data set. And each column or each variable that you're measuring from that instantaneous measurement is going to be separated from other columns by a comma, right? So let's take a look at what this looks like inside of Excel. Now this is a worksheet. Now think about a worksheet is you think of the worksheet as extending infinitely in all directions. It does have a corner in the upper left where it starts at A1 is the first square. But you gotta understand that these squares, you can always add rows or columns ahead of this and push everything that is in that corner into the middle of the screen. So you can think of these worksheets as being infinite in all directions. You can see in this worksheet I've got a few columns that I'm using. It looks like I have some data here. I have something else here. This is a formula. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But as you can see from this comma separated value, the first row might be the column names. If you have some information about people, you might have these column names. This is just a label. It's a type of data. So you can come in and you can give this a label. Street, let's see, house. Right? You also have other types of data called numbers. Right? And you have a third type of data, functions. So you can see here, I've just have these three numbers. What can I do with that? Well, what if I went over here and just said, let's add them up. So the way you enter a function is when you click on this square, you come up here to this function window and you hit equals, and then you get to choose from a lot of different functions. The most basic function is sum, and lets you sum over a region, right? So let's say I want to sum over this row. Now that I've typed sum in the open parentheses, I can click here and then put a comma there. And you see how that's highlighted? That means that when this sum runs, it's going to sum up those elements. Now if I change one of these elements, the sum is automatically updated. So these are the basic features of a worksheet. The basic features are, it's a way to organize textual and numerical data in a grid, a sequence of grids that are related. And you can zoom in on any part and add more structure into that part. Structure the information at that location. And you can spread out. Plenty of room to work. And then other parts can have dependencies on previously structured parts. That's what the functions are about. So one of the things you might see someone like me do is if I had a region here, right? I might highlight that whole region and say, I want to just fill it with random numbers, right? So we're just going to fill it with random numbers between 0 and 1. Okay, like you could say these are probabilities. Let's just call that probabilities of these variables here. Okay, so now you just have the probability of these variables here taking on these values, each of these elements, right? Let's see. Label that 1. All right, and then down here, I'm going to say this is equal to 2 plus 1. So that's equal to 2 now, right? Now can I make that more general? Let's see. Anyway. Then you might take this data and you might say something like, what if I wanted to get the average of E across all of my elements? All right. Say I wanted to compute the averages here, right, of these elements. One of the things you can do is you can go in and click on formulas. Now this is something very key. If you go over the more formulas, you'll see that there's statistical formulas, right? And we're going to label this J2 to J18. Okay. Damn. That's the average, right? Now what I can do is I'm going to take this. Oh. Copy. All right. So now I pasted this here. I pasted this function here, but look what it did. When I pasted this function, it automatically changed the column indexes. So what it knows what I want it to do, right? So each of these has updated the column index of the range that I'm computing the average over. All right. And by the way, this is how you do ranges here. Okay, you've got this colon in between two squares. That's how you compute a range, right? I mean, you could list each number, but really, typically, you want to grab everything between a range. And Excel is usually pretty smart about how it is going to automatically give you good numbers for what you're trying to compute, right? Like, it probably knew from me putting this down at the end of this list that this is right where I wanted to go. Right. I mean, it's smart about how it figures out what you're really looking for. So here's the way I computed the averages of each of these. Now, what if I came in here and said, across here, I want to know the standard deviation. Well, you would go over here to more functions, and you go into standard deviation. Where you hover over each function, it gives you a little more detail, right? Based on entire population, given its arguments, ignores logical values in text. Okay, so what it's saying there is that if your range happens to capture just something that's not a number, it's going to ignore it, right? Sometimes it can make a difference. And it's picking here L2 to I2. So it's picking here, I2 to O2, right? But it might be a bit much. I think we really want to start at J. So we'll adjust it here. And we don't want to go as far as O. We just want N. There. And now we've computed the standard deviation. All right. So this gives you a few ideas of how to use Excel, right? But let's see. Remember, if I save this out as a CSV, what's that going to look like? It's going to be complicated because you're going to get different rows with different numbers of commas. Typically, the CSV file format is only useful for one table, right? Where maybe the first row in that file format is just the column headers, and everything else is a data item. The same number of columns as the first row. Now we've moved away from that a little bit, but you can save this sheet as it is, just as an Excel thing in and of itself. And that's what we're going to do right here. So now, I saved it. Uh-oh. We're going back here for a minute. So, but sometimes, like I said, if you're using software to collect data, you'll often get it in CSV. But once you pull it here, you can pull it into here, you can do a little more with it. Now, there's a lot of functions up here. These formulas, they're very easy to use. You can often highlight the data and then apply it to that formula, right? So let's see. There's a lot of things you can do. Looks like we can do pie charts here. So one of the things I'm doing in this video is I'm talking about how to do a lot of different things that you're going to need to know for the quiz, right? So you're going to need to know how to do functions over an Excel sheet, how to compute things like the average, standard deviation, and compute a pie chart. So let's say we want to add a pie, right? And what we want to do is, actually, let me re-add it. First, typically you want to highlight what you want. And now let's try adding a pie. How about that? 16 numbers. Gives you some information, right? Alright, let's see what if I add up over here? What if I grab this part? Let's see. I'm going to insert another pie chart. What's that look like? That might be a little more understandable. Right, that's how you add a pie chart. Very simple. Okay, so I hope that shows you some of the basic ideas. But let's go back and take a look now at some of these tutorials up here, because I haven't seen these tutorials myself. Let's take a look. Oh, this reminds me. You're gonna need to know how to change the color of a border. Yeah. So if you want to change the background here, the background color over here, a lot of these options here, these formatting options, theme color, standard field colors, more fill, change the text colors here. I think you can still put numbers in here. That's a label. Of course, we can put a number in. It's a number. As you can see, labels have one side, numbers on another. They're treated differently. And of course, you have functions that I was showing earlier. You click on formulas, right? What kind of formula do you need? You need to convert dates and times. Do you need to do math, trigonometry? But statistical is what you guys are going to be using. And that's the ones, those are the ones that I would get most familiar with. Know your basic statistics. Know how to compute average. Know how to compute standard deviation. One thing that's going to show up on the test is an if statement, right? So how are we going to do an if statement? Let's do an if statement right here, right? What we're going to do is, if is interesting, so you have a logical test, right? So what we're going to say is, if street is higher than house, okay? So if C C3 C4 and I'll explain how this works. So what we did here, I'm copying, and I'm going down here and I'm pasting it here. Let me try that again. So what we're saying here is that we have a test. Is C3 greater than C4? If that's true, this function is going to return the first value. Otherwise, it's going to return a second. Street is not greater than house, so it's going to return house. But if I come here, paste that function into this box, you can see that now it returns street. Remember, it updated the column, it updated the row, even when I copy pasted it. Excel's smart that way. All right, I think that's enough for the first video. Make sure to understand how to the best thing to do is create some fake statistic, fake thing like this, and then play around creating charts. You can get data on the web, a lot of data. You can also just create it your own. How I created this table here in the middle, you just highlight a region, right? You go up here, you hit equals R&D. You have three choices. You can do rand or rand between, I would recommend. So rand will give you a number between 0 and 1. Rand between will give you a number between x and y, where x and y you supply. So let's try rand between, let's see, 1 and 100. Now the thing is that if you just hit enter here, it only goes into the square, the upper left hand square, but you want it to apply in every square equally. This function will be applied everywhere. So you hit control and you hit enter, and you can see you can generate your own data that way, a big table of your own data, and try experimenting building pie charts, things like that. All right, let me know what you think of this video format. I tried to make it a little more interesting so you can see me, maybe get a better visual on the screen itself. So let me know if there's anything you'd like me to go over. Send me an email. My name's Joseph Nunn, and you can reach me at joseph.nunn@uci. All right, guys. Thank you for your time.